Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa. I'm Clarisse Fortuné and these are the headlines. Ali Bongo Dimba's son is in prison. Noureddin Bongo Valentin and several members of the ousted Gabonese president's cabinet are charged with corruption and embezzlement. Aid payments for Somalia are to be suspended after the UN discovers theft and misuse of support meant to tackle famine. And there he said it. Rwanda's President Paul Kagame will seek re-election in next year's presidentials after 23 years in power. Too long? He says he doesn't care what some may think. Ali Bongo Odimba's son, Noureddin Bongo Valentin, has been placed into custody along with several cabinet members of the ousted Gabon president. He has been charged with corruption, embezzlement of public funds, and money laundering. Laurent Bersecher has the details.
3 weeks after the coup, Gabon's transitional government seems intent on putting words into action. 10 people associated with Ali Bongo's government were placed in custody on Tuesday and stand accused of a myriad of corruption-related charges.
Falsification of the president's signature, distributing and receiving undue sums, complicity in embezzlement of public funds, corruption, embezzlement of public funds, money laundering, complicity in money laundering, criminal conspiracy, usurping titles and functions.
The suspects were all arrested during last month's coup, which saw the military overthrow long-standing President Ali Bongo. They include former members of his cabinet, but also his eldest son, Noureddin Bongo Valentin. For many Gabonese, the arrests were a welcome sign of the military's willingness to put an end to the impunity of the Bongo era, decades marked by widespread corruption, embezzling, and bad governance. In France, several members of the Bongo family remain under investigation in the so-called ill-gotten goods case. They're suspected of having benefited from fraudulently acquired real estate, worth an estimated 85 million euros.
Aid payments for Somalia is to be temporarily suspended. The European Union's decision comes after United Nations probe found widespread theft and misuse of support meant to avert famine. Olivia Bizot tells us more.
One of the conclusions of this report is that aid intended for Somalia's most vulnerable people has instead been stolen by humanitarian workers, landowners and security officials. Now, corruption is nothing new in Somalia, and aid distribution has been a problem for decades. It's been complicated by weak government institutions and widespread insecurity. In 2011, there were revelations of aid theft, and after that, humanitarian organizations converted their way of giving aid, and they shifted to cash-based transfers, meaning that they gave the money directly to communities and individuals as opposed to going through the government. But what this report shows is that even these cash-based transfers can be vulnerable to corruption. Now, earlier I spoke to a Somali analyst called Noureddin Ali, and she told me that these cash-based transfers are actually the most vulnerable to mismanagement. She said that we've just gone from one system of mismanagement to another. And she said that what needs to happen now is for these donors, for the government, to be asking themselves some serious questions about where this money is going. Now, last year, the European Commission donated $7 million to the World Food Programme's operations in Somalia. But Noureddin Ali said that the World Food Programme continues to be plagued by corruption and poor practices. So what needs to happen now is for the whole of the aid structure in Somalia to shift. Now, every year, Somalia receives $2 billion of aid, and most of that aid does not go to the people who need it the most.
Off the back of a mutual defense pact signed between the military rulers of Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali a few days ago, Burkina Faso has approved a law allowing the dispatch of its troops to neighboring Niger. According to the new text, a military contingent could be sent for a 3-month renewable period. Niger faces the threat of military intervention to restore civilian rule following a coup 2 months ago. Dozens of journalists protested outside the Ministry of Justice in Kinshasa to demand the release of their colleague Stanis Vujakera. The Jeune Afrique correspondent has been held since 8 September. Vujakera has been interrogated about a Jeune Afrique report on the murder of former Congolese Transport Minister Cherubin Okende and the military intelligence possible involvement in that murder. The report did not, however, carry Vujakera's name. President Félix Tshisekedi had this to say.
I believe in the separation of powers. And I think the Western world knows exactly what I mean by this. I do not get involved in judicial matters. I do have sympathy for this young man, and I'm sorry to see what's happened to him.
Amnesty International denounced DRC's authorities' attack on human rights, including, I quote, the rights of journalists. Paul Kagame has announced that he will run for a fourth term in 2024. The Rwandan president has been holding the highest office for over 23 years. Many international observers and opponents view with concern his long stay in power. Details from Kigali with Clément Diroma.
The announcement of Paul Kagame running for re-election went quite unnoticed in Rwanda, as local media barely highlighted a discrete passage in President Kagame's interview in the French magazine Jeune Afrique. And in Kigali, this comes as no surprise to anyone. Last April, Kagame was re-elected as the head of his party, the RPF, with 99% of the votes, 99%. The same score was also seen in the last presidential election in 2017, marking the beginning of his third term after amending the constitution in 2015 to allow for his re-election. These changes was implemented following a referendum approved by Rwandans with 98% support this time. This long stay in power exceeding 20 years has always been criticized by his opponents, NGOs and Western diplomats. Kagame responding to this during the same interview, saying, and I quote, "Sorry for the West, but what these countries think is not a problem." End of quote. The head of state is expected to face, among others, Frank Habineza from the Green Party, considered the only authorized opposition party in the country.
Paul Kagame, who also spoke today at the United Nations General Assembly, he had this message for the international community.
We must also cool down on conflict to peace and getting lost in process and formalities only serves to confirm the selective attention of some in the international community. We still have a long way to go. Africa urgently needs to be fully represented in bodies where decisions concerning our future are made.
While the African countries have emitted the least carbon, it is also the continent that's the hardest hit by the climate crisis. Humanity's addiction to fossil fuels has opened the gates to hell. These are the UN Secretary General's strong words as he was kicking off today a climate meeting at the UN.
Humanity has opened the gates of hell. Horrendous heat is having horrendous effects. Distraught farmers watching crops carried away by floods, sweltering temperatures spawning disease, and thousands fleeing in fear as historic fires rage. Climate action is dwarfed by the scale of the challenge. If nothing changes, we are heading towards a 2.8-degree temperature rise, towards a dangerous and unstable world.
And one of the solutions to the climate crisis is cutting down on food waste. Kenya has come up with an innovative answer. By harnessing the power of the sun, mobile cold storage facilities kitted out with solar panels are helping farmers to get more produce to market before it spoils. Around a third of fresh produce goes bad before being sold. Caroline Lamboli reports.
Watermelons, avocados, fruits that perish just within a few days of being harvested. Kenya's temperatures are to blame, and many don't have access to adequate cold storage facilities. Between 30% and 40% of produce spoils before it even reaches the market.
The major causes of post-harvest loss is how the produce is managed immediately after harvest. For example, if you have cereals, have they been dried properly before you store it? What facilities are you using for storage?
Cold rooms like these ones could help reduce losses. This Kenyan company now offers rural farmers solar-powered mobile cold storage facilities. It has won the backing of 12,000 farmers hoping to reduce post-harvest losses of fresh produce.
Solar energy is one of the free sources of energy that could reduce our operational costs. So we opted to use solar, which enables us to deploy anywhere.
The company also buys products from farmers and connects them directly with large distributors, making them less dependent on middlemen.
They say they're coming to collect our harvest, but then they come late, and our oranges are spoilt. Now we have Soko Fresh. They're doing really well and they pay us on time.
The business has now extended its services to fish farmers, also highly dependent on the cold chain.
Let's end with a bit of sport. I have a question for you. Who will you be rooting for tomorrow at the Rugby World Cup? Namibia will be facing France. Well, look at these images. This is Obano, the giraffe. He's in a zoo in France, and he had to predict the winner, you'll see, by eating it. And he made his decision. Look, he's eating France. Yes, sorry guys, sorry Namibian fans. It seems like Obano said it will be France who will win tomorrow's game. Well, we'll see if Obano was right. That's it for us. Thank you for watching Eye on Africa. Stay with us for more news.
The world is ever changing. The news doesn't wait.
France 24 gives a global perspective that an educated, intelligent, and active viewer is going to want to have to be able to fully understand the issues of the day.
That's why it will always be there to help make sense of world events.
J'ai l'habitude de suivre France 24 partout où je me trouve, et ce grâce à mon smartphone, parce que je ne reste pas souvent devant la télé.
Quand une information circule sur la toile, j'utilise l'application de France 24 pour vérifier l'authenticité.
For the best international coverage, 24 hours a day, no matter what, France 24 is with you everywhere, all the time.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.